Okay, hello. Yeah, it's been a while. Again. Yeah, if you want to know like a smidge of what I've been doing like work-wise and everything, I've uploaded some of my recent work to the link in the description. I don't realize how long it's been until I sit down to record these videos again, and then I'm like, oh my god, it's been so long. When we finish this series, we'll move on to actual sagas, you know, like where it's like 5-issue miniseries and I'll just record them all at the same time, like in bulk. So if you're still interested, and I don't blame you if you're not, leave a comment below and just kind of let me know what you guys wish for me to review. But yeah, thank you for joining me. This is the review for Ultimate Spider-Man issue 123. And in the previous issue, we saw the entire comic focus on the Ultimate Universe's most infamous villain, the Shocker. Now, throughout the entire series, we've gotten to know Shocker as one of those nice bad guys. Nice bad guys. You know what I mean. But the issue was also the first time we saw Shocker actually get the upper hand on Spider-Man, and in doing so, we later discovered the core motivation of Shocker's character. Basically, he's super smart and everybody was taking credit for his ideas at Roxxon. And I love how Brian Michael Bendis, the writer, actually gave Shocker some kind of motivation, because at first he was just this random villain that kept popping up. So it made the character more interesting, and it's obviously Shocker's character development. Anyway, the issue ended with Spider-Man breaking free and taking down Shocker, but I do wish he let Shocker escape in order to continue his quest, because from my perspective, his actions had been justified, kind of. Like, he wasn't just robbing banks for the sake of robbing banks and causing havoc, and even though it's still wrong, I wish Spider-Man let him go as an understanding of why he's doing it in a way. So as I said earlier, this is my review for Ultimate Spider-Man issue 123. Let's get into it. So the issue begins with us joining Eddie Brock on a park bench, kind of like Forrest Gump, wondering how his life got to this specific point, and how he's literally a criminal, like an arch nemesis of Spider-Man. But it's especially important to point out how he mentions all of this Venom stuff has taken place within just a matter of months. Now, Eddie continues on with the flashbacks to his battle with Spider-Man in the street, and you'll also notice from this comic onwards, this is where the Ultimate Spider-Man video game takes place. So Eddie can't remember anything and recalls waking up in a park attacking a late night runner, and I love how Eddie really comes across as some kind of victim. Like, he's most definitely a criminal, but there's this sense of being a real victim to the symbiote, and a realization of how ruined his life really is within a short period of time. And if you really look into it, you can also see how Venom and Spider-Man are complete opposites, like not only in their actions, but how their lives have spiraled upon gaining superpowers. For example, Peter was bitten by the spider and gained powers, saves lives, eventually gets praise. And then on the other hand, you've got Eddie, who becomes Venom, and not only does he become a villain, but he can't control the power that he's got. And essentially, his entire life has changed for the worse. And it's great because it's just more symbolism of how, even though Spider-Man and Venom are sort of the same, they're also kind of polar opposites at the same time. Also, as we go through the comic, keep an eye on how the people he's talking to on the park bench keep changing. Like, that's not a coincidence. But yeah, Eddie realizes that whenever he's near Spider-Man, the Venom symbiote suddenly becomes easier to control, and overall, Eddie feels better. That's also similar to what happens in the Ultimate Spider-Man video game. Spider-Man and Venom are connected in some way. Now, something that took me by surprise is, like, completely out of nowhere, we have this reintroduction of Silver Sable, which I feel was a little random. And although it's a retelling of what Eddie's remembering, I would have preferred the comic to focus primarily on him and Spider-Man, because Silver Sable, it just kind of feels like it's just like another character to keep track of, if you get what I mean. So I think I've mentioned it before, but I'm not the biggest fan of comic books with flashbacks. They feel very much like filler issues where they exist just to progress the series forward towards what the writer actually wants us to read. So kind of similar to a few issues ago where Spider-Man was recalling his battle with Omega Red at the Daily Bugle, this issue can most likely be something to easily forget about as well. Like, we could completely remove this issue from the series and we most likely wouldn't miss it. Now, one thing that I did find interesting was that although these comics are running alongside the Ultimate Spider-Man video game, the video came out in 2005, and these comics for War of the Symbiotes, which ties into the Ultimate Spider-Man video game, didn't come out until 2008. So that may also run into the reasons why we're seeing Silver Sable sort of pop up like this randomly, because these comics are trying to tie into the video game, which happened, well, 3 years before this comic released. But even if it didn't, it's best to consider all scenarios. And you don't know what kind of deal they had between the video game and the comic series to kind of mix those two platforms together, so could be a reason. But in saying that, on these panels, I do love how monstrous Venom is looking, especially towards Silver Sable. She's obviously known as a character to know how to handle certain situations. She more or less is the best at what she does, so it's cool to see how she handles the Venom character. But honestly, I do have to say I don't know how she didn't die when she got thrown into a car like that. She's not superhuman, she don't have any powers, but I guess that's comics for you. However, regardless of me saying that, I do really like the battle with Spider-Man and Venom in the museum. Peter's on a school trip and his spider sense starts going crazy. I love how claustrophobic it feels, sort of being trapped in a delicate building with Venom, who is such a chaotic character anyway. And we did have the teacher on Peter's school trip just mention how everything in there is super expensive, obviously because it's a museum. So it sort of adds to that delicacy of trying to fight each other or control each other, but also not just tearing the entire place apart. And so I think Mark Bagley's done an excellent job of sort of considering that, you know, like actually making the panels feel claustrophobic just by looking at them. There's not really a lot of space to be fighting a villain such as Venom. So I'm impressed with the artwork and how it connects to the story being told on the pages. And as always, Mark Bagley's an amazing artist anyway, so it's great to notice that. Now, as we can see, Silver Sable arrives just in time before Spider-Man basically gets eaten alive, as this is where the issue sort of comes to a close. Now, I do love how the issue ends with the guy on the bench realizing in that moment that Eddie is the monster he saw on the news, and then Eddie just devours him alive. That's why there has been multiple different people sat next to Eddie throughout the entire issue listening to his story, because every time there was a new person sat there, Eddie would just eat them and then a new person would sit down. So I really love that subtle foreshadowing throughout the entire comic. Now, overall, the issue is good, and Venom in the Ultimate Universe is such a special kind of character. Venom is kind of one of the factors as to what made the Ultimate Spider-Man comics so popular to begin with, especially the art style of Venom as well. So props to Mark Bagley, the artist, for drawing up such an iconic version of the character. Okay, so that was it for Ultimate Spider-Man issue 123, and I still can't believe we're still only on issue 123, like we should have finished it by now. Now, if you want to see more, you can click here and watch me play through the entire Ultimate Spider-Man video game, and if you click here, you can read and review the Spider-Man Back in Black saga, which is basically where Spider-Man gets super angry and just gains like immense strength. It's amazing. Here as well, you can hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you guys in the next video.